Hello, this is Julian with Coffee Reviews, and today we'll be reviewing the Hartumi Birhanu Dido Natural Processed Ethiopia from Wes Ngopi. And there's the bag right there. And Wes Ngopi, based out of Shah, Malaysia. And this coffee was featured in a recent blind taste test rankings video where it finished first place out of 5 Wes Ngopi coffees on that day. And if you watched that video, then you saw that I was extremely impressed with the clarity of this one, given that it is a natural processed coffee. Couple that with the fact that it offered wonderful fruit intensity, and it immediately became one of my favorite coffees from the entirety of that blind taste test. And it'll definitely be interesting to see if it remained my favorite by the end, as this right here is day 50. And recipe we went with for this coffee was our standard recipe at a 16:1 water to coffee ratio, brewed at 96 degrees Celsius, about 205 degrees Fahrenheit. And I like this one best through the V60, which indicates a more medium fine grind roast profile for this coffee. So even though at times it might be a little bit more tricky to tell when it comes to more processed coffees, this one was definitely in line with our previous experiences or our recent experiences with Wes Ngopi, which once again does continue to remain on the very light side of things, as this coffee is still a very light coffee by most standards and metrics. With all that out of the way, let's go ahead and start discussing this coffee. Day 21, first impression, and that was of course the blind taste test day, and I was immediately impressed by this coffee because of its wonderfully tremendous fruit forward qualities, mostly dominant in a blueberry bomb sense with above average clarity for a natural processed coffee. Additionally, there are cleaner red berry tones to it with a strong stone fruit in both a fresh fruit and sugary sense, as well as a wild fruit feel to the cup, which definitely lent itself towards a very stunning first impression, one of the best first impressions I've had of any coffee this year. Day 24 through the Chemex, and the coffee does continue to offer a wildly fruit-forward aroma with a very distinct blueberry tone, as it's mostly translated in the cup as well, with a very high level of clarity for a natural processed coffee, as it does continue to focus on the berry theme yet again. In addition to that, there is a slight bit of the listed lychee today, so it's lent itself towards another great day. Day 27 through the April brewer, and it's another nice day of this coffee, if maybe not quite as impressive as some of the earlier experiences, as it does still continue to focus on the strong fruit forward aspects with an elevated level of clarity. A bit more of the lighter berry tones are present this time, in line with the listed strawberry as well as the lychee, while the blueberry note does remain an ever-present quality within this one. Day 30 through the V60 with some higher extraction adjustments, and I was extremely curious to see how this coffee was going to hold up if we did push it a little bit. And interestingly, it was the best it had been to this point, as it did hold up surprisingly well despite the fact that we decided to go a little bit heavier on this one. Still relatively high level of clarity with an abundance of intense fruits ranging from the blueberry forward tone to a very rich stone fruit and lingering red berries again. So this was a very nice experience for this coffee. Day 33 through the Chemex with the same adjustments, and this was the first time I felt like we might have gone a little too far in terms of pushing this coffee, as there was less clarity in place of a slight bit more fermentiness and heaviness, primarily in the berry aspects. And when I originally purchased this coffee, that was actually my fear, given that we did have that lychee note list on here, given that there was a strawberry note list on here, so I was kind of concerned that that might be the experience we had with this coffee, despite the fact that the only other natural processed coffee I tried from this coffee roaster did lend itself towards a much cleaner profile. So that was the first time I'd experienced that with this coffee, as it did have a much more fruit forward aspect to it. So I did need to adjust, given that I was seeking a lot more of those blueberry-like tones to this one. Day 36 through the V60 with our standard recipe, and it is very nice once again, still with the higher level of cleanliness and a very fruit forward experience. The vintage natural blueberry-like feel is present yet again, with an abundance of the complementary red berry aspects to it, but the entirety of the coffee is yet again fruit dominated with great intensity and sweetness, and I was very happy to continue to go with this trend on this coffee, mostly because it was such a vintage experience to have that natural Ethiopian blueberry-like feel to this coffee, given it's been something that's harder and harder to find these days in natural processed coffees. So I was just extremely happy with the way that that cup turned out. Day 39 through the chemics with our standard recipe, and it's a very nice day, and honestly it went well regardless of which brew method we went with. Main reason I settled on the V60 was mostly because of that one chemex experience we had where it wasn't necessarily the cleanest. It does have great clarity with that blueberry feel on this day, as we had the recipe toned down to a little bit lower extraction of a feel on it. The red fruits continue to remain present in a very sweet sense, with the entire coffee offering once again that vintage Ethiopian-like feel to it. Day 42, back to the V60 with our standard recipe, and there's continued success as the entire coffee is extremely fruit forward with plenty of the berry notes to it, perhaps in a slightly more red sense this time around, but still relatively high clarity with a complementary mango. And I haven't even discussed a lot of the stone fruit qualities to this one, mostly because I focused in on the berry attributes of this one since that was so dominant within this coffee. All right, let's go ahead and put up the tasting wheel so you can see what we're getting. And we have 2 level 5s, so let's go through those, and we'll start with the sweetness, level 5. And with a lot of the other coffees, I continued to mention that they did not score the level 5 for sweetness, and that's because they were kind of being compared to this coffee, which offered such wonderful fruit sweetness, and it was a really intense and enjoyable fruit sweetness to it, as it continued to come in that very vintage Ethiopian-like feel. Wonderful blueberries, and we'll get to that here shortly, but I do have to say that the sweetness, especially coming in that fruit sense, was very enjoyable, especially given that the cleanliness is there at that level 4. Let's go discuss both of those things now, starting with the berry fruit at that level 5. Yes, this is that classic blueberry bomb, but even outside of that, it offers wonderful definition and clarity to the other fruit components within that berry sense. So that strawberry, that lychee, both of which just wonderfully clean, abundant, and prominent. Maybe not necessarily quite as much as that blueberry, but even then, given that those things do tend to come out a little heavier when it comes to natural processed coffees, I was very happy that they were very clean within this one. So having that score there at that level 5 with the sweetness at that level 5 is off to an extremely good start. But what makes those things really stand out is the fact that the cleanliness did reach that level 4. This might be the cleanest natural processed coffee that we've reviewed this year, and one of the cleanest natural processed coffees that we've ever reviewed on this channel. It offered wonderful clarity to it, and I'm extremely happy that it did score at that level 4. Only time where I was a little concerned was that one chemex day we had where there was a little bit more fermentiness to it, but outside of that, it offered great clarity and cleanliness, especially for modern natural processed Ethiopian coffees, and that basically makes the entirety of this tasting wheel having that cleanliness there at the level 4 most important note within this tasting wheel. Finish, level 4, definitely on the higher side, though I'm very happy that it did not reach that higher side of the level 4 to the point where it reached that level 5, because oftentimes that can make these coffees a little too intense and overbearing. So this one had a great balance in that sense, as it did seem to finish off in a sense that didn't make this one overbearing. Plenty of the, we'll say, more red fruit tones were present within the finish of this coffee, as at the forefront it was a little bit more of that heavier blueberry tone right at the start. Acidity, level 4, and that was probably one of the more interesting parts of this coffee for me, because once again with the other Wes Ngopi coffees, the majority of them finished at that level 3 mark, which just goes to show that this one had a little bit more of that acidic tone to it. In addition to that, the florality at a level 4, and I hardly even mentioned the florality, mostly because this coffee really was dominated by the fruit qualities within it. With that being said, the florals were present as well, and I could definitely see them being in a little bit more of that darker floral sense, a little bit more of like a lavender feel to this one, and that was notable enough to the point where it did reach pretty high within this tasting wheel. Citrus fruit, level 4, another thing that I didn't even bother to discuss too much, and that was a little bit of the brightness that did give a little bit of a contrasting feel to the very prominent berry tones that were present within this one. And I could say that maybe even a slight bit of a tartness to those berries did seem to contribute to the citrus feeling a little higher within this one, but it was intense enough to score that level 4 mark, as well as the stone fruit, which I mentioned briefly from time to time, some slightly more sugary stone fruits. I can't recall whether or not they had any sort of stone fruit list on here. I think maybe they had a mango note, which would make a lot of sense given that we did score that pretty high in that sense. There's plenty of that, but once again, all of these things are an afterthought to just how prominent the berry fruit components are present within this coffee. We move on to a couple of level 3s, and we'll start with the caramel level 3. So that's entirely speaking to the candied aspect of this one, as at times I felt like it was reminiscent of gummies, like it's a berry gummy feel. I'm mostly thinking of those Lifesaver berry gummies. That's the best description I have for just how intense the candied aspect was within this coffee. Body, level 3. Yes, this one had a fair bit of texture to it. It's really nice to compare these coffees side by side because you do get a good idea of kind of seeing where you want to place each of the like body and acidity for these coffees. So this one had a little bit more body than the majority of the other Wes Ngopi coffees, giving it a little bit more depth to it. And I'm kind of looking at this, nothing else really worth discussing in this tasting wheel. I do think it's a pretty good representation of what I was getting from this coffee. All right, so my overall thoughts and impressions of this coffee. Unsurprisingly, this one did stay my favorite by the end of the time we had reviewed it. It was a little bit better than the Benchmagi Lucy Station washed Ethiopian Gesha that we've also reviewed. That one still remaining my favorite wash processed Ethiopian coffee that we've reviewed this year. But even though I said this one was a little better, I honestly think it was probably the most memorable and enjoyable coffee. Anytime there is a natural processed Ethiopian coffee that scores that high in terms of the cleanliness, it's going to just absolutely impress me. And especially given that this one came in such a vintage Ethiopian blueberry-like feel, I was just thoroughly impressed with this coffee. Let me go through all of the accolades I want to give this coffee. This one is my second favorite Wes Ngopi coffee, and the biggest reason I have to say second favorite is because that Ngise Gamera that we had a sample of from Airworks is the most impressive natural processed Ethiopian coffee I've had in a long time. And it's unfortunate I did not get that coffee because that one would easily be, if not my third favorite, maybe even higher than that coffee from the entirety of this year. But as of right now, this coffee is probably either my third or fourth. It's definitely in the top 5 of my favorite coffees this entire year, and easily my favorite natural processed coffee that we've reviewed this year. Probably my favorite natural processed coffee that we've reviewed ever, which does speak volumes to just how good that Ngise Gamera was, as that would easily be my favorite natural processed coffee that we've reviewed in the entirety of this channel. So massive credit to Wes Ngopi on this one. I've heard some feedback from others really enjoying this coffee, and I can see why so many people would enjoy this coffee, which kind of leads into the type of person I would suggest this coffee to. If you do enjoy your vintage natural processed Ethiopian coffees, which once again I feel like is a little bit of a lost thing at this point, those blueberry bombs, this one's an absolute blueberry bomb. In addition to that, it offers additional berry components to it. Wonderful strawberry, wonderful lychee, wonderful mango. It's so many fruit components. This one is so fruit dominant and so fruit sweet while still offering great clarity that it just reminds me specifically of coffees from the past. And I even brewed this for somebody and they said that this is probably one of the favorite coffees, if they're not favorite coffee that they've ever had. So that's just a testament to how enjoyable this coffee was. I found it to be just a tremendous experience. I think for the most part, that's the best way I can leave this review. If you by chance had an opportunity to try this coffee, I'd definitely love to know your thoughts and impressions of it as well. If you're enjoying the content, give this video a like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed. This right here has been a review of the Halo Hartumi Birhanu Dido Natural Processed Ethiopia from Wes Ngopi. Thanks for watching.